The phone was still warm in my hand when I realized everything had just changed. "You don't get to decide that," I had said, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was hammering against my ribs like it was trying to break free. My son-in-law Bradley laughed on the other end of the line. Not a nervous laugh, not an uncomfortable laugh, a laugh that told me he thought he'd already won. "Why not?" he asked, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. I went silent, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I had too many. Because 3 months earlier, his wife, my daughter Karen, had sat in my kitchen with tears streaming down her face and told me the truth about the man she'd married 12 years ago. Because I knew things Bradley thought were still secret. Because at that very moment, divorce papers were being prepared in a lawyer's office downtown, and he had absolutely no idea. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Claire Nakamura, and I'm 62 years old. I live in a small ranch house in Asheville, North Carolina, the kind of house with a front porch where neighbors still wave, and a backyard garden where I grow tomatoes every summer. 4 years ago, I lost my husband Daniel to a sudden heart attack. He was here one morning drinking coffee and reading the paper, and by that evening, he was gone. After that, my daughters became my whole world, especially Karen, my oldest, who lived just 20 minutes away with her husband Bradley and my 2 grandchildren, Emma and Lucas. For years, my life had a rhythm to it. Wednesdays, I picked the kids up from school and we'd go for ice cream. Sunday, the whole family came to my house for dinner. I thought I knew my daughter's life. I thought I knew her marriage. I was wrong. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to do something for me. Take a deep breath. Just one, with me, right now. And please, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Morning coffee in Texas? Late night in Australia? It brings me so much comfort to know that women all over the world are listening to this, that none of us are walking these hard roads alone. If stories like this speak to something in your heart, please subscribe to Jessica Stories Vault. You shouldn't have to face these moments by yourself. The first time I noticed something was wrong was 6 months before that phone call. It was a Wednesday afternoon in late September, and I just picked up Emma and Lucas from school like I did every week. Emma was 10, all long legs and questions about everything. Lucas was 7, still small enough to hold my hand in parking lots. We were at our usual ice cream shop, Rocky's, the one with the red and white awning and the owner who always gave the kids extra sprinkles. Emma ordered her usual chocolate chip, but when I asked Lucas what he wanted, he went quiet and looked down at his shoes. "Buddy," I bent down to his level. "What's wrong?" "Dad says we're not supposed to tell you things anymore," he whispered. Something cold settled in my chest. "What kind of things, sweetheart?" Emma shot her brother a warning look, the kind of look that told me she'd been given the same instructions and was better at following them. "Nothing, Grandma," Emma said quickly, too quickly. "Lucas just gets confused sometimes." But Lucas wasn't confused. I could see it in his eyes. He wanted to tell me something, and someone had taught him not to. I bought them their ice cream and didn't push, but that night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the way Emma had looked at her brother, the way Lucas's little shoulders had hunched when he mentioned his father, the way both of them had seemed nervous, like they were worried about getting in trouble for something they hadn't even done. I told myself I was overreacting. Bradley had always been a bit controlling, the kind of man who needed things done his way, who didn't like it when people questioned his decisions. But he loved his kids, didn't he? And Karen had never said anything was seriously wrong. Except that wasn't quite true. Karen had been changing for a while, and I'd been too close to see it clearly. The way she'd stopped calling me just to chat. The way she'd started checking her phone constantly during our Sunday dinners, like she was waiting for permission to relax. The way she'd lost weight, but not in a healthy way. In the way that happens when someone is too anxious to eat. 2 weeks after the ice cream incident, everything came into focus. It was a Sunday dinner at my house. I'd made Karen's favorite, chicken pot pie with the flaky crust she'd loved since she was little. Bradley spent the entire meal criticizing everything. The crust was too thick. Karen had let the kids have too much screen time that week. Emma's grades weren't high enough. Lucas needed to toughen up and stop crying so much. I watched my daughter get smaller and smaller in her chair with every word he said. After dinner, Bradley took the kids outside to play, and I started clearing the table. When I walked back into the dining room for the last of the plates, I found Karen standing at the window, watching her family in the backyard. She was crying, but making no sound, just tears running down her face while she stood perfectly still. "Honey," I whispered, and she jumped like I'd startled her out of a nightmare. "I'm fine, Mom," she said automatically, wiping her face with her sleeve. "No, you're not." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something break open in her expression, like she'd been holding a door closed for so long and her arms had finally given out. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. We stood there in my dining room, the same room where she'd had birthday parties and graduation dinners and announced both of her pregnancies. And my daughter told me the truth about her marriage. Not all of it, not yet, but enough. She told me about the way Bradley controlled every dollar she spent, the way he'd convinced her to quit her nursing job years ago and now used her financial dependence as leverage. The way he criticized her constantly in front of the children, teaching them that it was normal for a husband to tear down his wife. The way he'd slowly isolated her from her friends, her colleagues, everyone who might have noticed what was happening. "I'm leaving him," she said, her voice shaking. "But I need to do it carefully. I need time to get everything in order, documents, bank accounts, a lawyer. And I need you to promise me something, Mom. Anything. You can't tell him you know. You have to act normal. If he thinks I'm planning something, he'll..." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't have to. I understood. So I promised. I promised to smile at Bradley's jokes, to nod at his opinions, to pretend I had no idea what was happening behind the closed doors of their beautiful colonial house. I promised to be patient while my daughter built her escape route one careful step at a time. What I didn't know was that Bradley was building something too. And 3 months later, when my phone rang on that Tuesday afternoon, and I saw his name on the screen, I knew in my bones that whatever came next was going to test everything I thought I understood about protecting the people I loved. "We've decided you shouldn't see the kids for a while," he said, his voice casual, like he was commenting on the weather. And that's when I said the words that would change everything. "You don't get to decide that." Because here's what Bradley didn't understand about mothers and grandmothers. We are so much stronger than we look. We are so much smarter than men like him give us credit for. And when you threaten our children or our grandchildren, you don't just wake up a worried woman. You wake up a force of nature who's been holding back for far too long. After I hung up the phone with Bradley, my hands were shaking so badly I had to set down the coffee cup I'd been holding. The silence in my kitchen felt enormous. Outside my window, the November afternoon was gray and cold, the kind of day where the sun never quite breaks through the clouds. My neighbors' wind chimes were making that lonely sound they make before a storm. I stood there for a full minute, maybe longer, just breathing, trying to slow my heartbeat, trying to think clearly. Then I did what I'd promised Karen I would do if Bradley ever made a move like this. I called her lawyer. Sandra Martinez answered on the second ring. She was a family law attorney who specialized in cases like Karen's, women leaving controlling marriages, women who needed to plan their exits carefully. Karen had been working with her in secret for 3 months, and I'd met her once, briefly, when Karen needed me to witness some documents. "Mrs. Nakamura," Sandra said when I identified myself. "Are you all right?" "He called me." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Bradley. He says I'm not allowed to see the grandchildren anymore." There was a pause, and I could hear Sandra typing on her keyboard. "Did he say why?" "No, just that we've decided. But Sandra..." I took a breath. Karen didn't decide this. She would never keep the kids from me. This is all him. "I agree. And Mrs. Nakamura, this is actually helpful for our case. It shows the controlling behavior we've been documenting." "Did he make any threats? Say anything about Karen?" "No, he laughed when I told him he couldn't make that decision. He thinks..." I had to pause, swallowing down the anger that was rising in my throat. "He thinks he's already won. He has no idea she's leaving. Good, let's keep it that way for now. The divorce papers are ready to file. We were planning to wait until after Thanksgiving, but given this development, I think we should move faster. How soon can you and Karen meet with me? She's working at the grocery store until 6. I can bring her to your office after that. Perfect. 7 o'clock tonight. And Mrs. Nakamura? Don't engage with Bradley if he calls again. Don't argue. Don't explain. Just tell him you need to speak with Karen first. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and tried to piece together what had triggered this. Bradley didn't make moves without a reason. He was calculating, strategic. So why now? Why suddenly try to cut me out of the kids' lives? Then I remembered something Emma had said last Wednesday, the last time I'd seen the children. We'd been in my garden, picking the last of the fall vegetables. Emma had been quiet, which wasn't like her. Finally, she looked up at me with those serious brown eyes and said, "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "If somebody's dad is mean to their mom, is that the kid's fault?" My heart had stopped. I'd knelt down in the dirt right there, taking her small hands in mine. "No, baby, never. Why would you ask that?" She'd looked away toward my neighbor's fence. "No reason, just wondering." I should have pushed harder. I should have asked more questions, but Karen had made me promise not to involve the children in any of this until she was ready, and I'd been trying so hard to honor that promise. Now I wondered if Emma had said something to Bradley, if she'd asked him a question that made him nervous, if he'd realized his daughter was starting to see through the performance he put on for the outside world. The thought made me sick. I needed to do something with my hands, so I started making soup. That's what I always did when I was upset. I cooked. There was something calming about the rhythm of chopping vegetables, the smell of onions and garlic and hot oil, the way a pot of soup could fill a house with the promise that things might be okay. While the soup simmered, I went to my bedroom closet and pulled down the box I'd been keeping for Karen. Inside were copies of everything she'd given me over the past 3 months. Bank statements showing how Bradley had been moving money into accounts she didn't have access to. Screenshots of text messages where he'd called her terrible names. A journal where she'd documented years of incidents. The times he'd screamed at her until she cried. The times he'd punished her by giving her the silent treatment for days. The times he'd threatened to take the kids away if she didn't do exactly what he wanted. There was also something else in that box. Something I'd added on my own without telling Karen. It was a small notebook where I'd been writing down everything the children said to me. Every worried comment from Emma. Every time Lucas flinched when someone raised their voice. Every Wednesday for the past 6 months, I'd written down what I'd observed, with dates and details. If you've ever kept secrets to protect someone you love, you know what I'm talking about. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to document something quietly, knowing you might need proof later? It's one of the hardest things I've ever done. Watching my grandchildren suffer and not being able to fix it right away. At 6:30, I drove to the grocery store where Karen worked part-time. Bradley had allowed her to get this job 6 months ago, after years of insisting she stay home. What he didn't know was that this job had given her something more valuable than the minimum wage paycheck. A place outside his control, coworkers who became friends, a manager who'd noticed the bruises on Karen's spirit even if there were never any on her body. I waited in the parking lot, watching the automatic doors. When Karen finally emerged in her employee vest, pulling her coat on against the cold, she looked exhausted. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and even from across the parking lot, I could see the tension in her shoulders. She spotted my car and hurried over, sliding into the passenger seat quickly. "Mom, what's wrong?"
"You never pick me up from work."
"Bradley called me today." The color drained from her face. "What did he say?" "That I'm not allowed to see the kids anymore. That you've both decided." Karen's hands flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, I never... Mom, I would never..." "I know, sweetheart, I know." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "But we need to move fast now. I talked to Sandra. We're meeting her at 7. Karen nodded, but she looked terrified. "He's going to know. As soon as the papers are served, he's going to know I planned this. He's going to be angry," I said gently. "But you won't be there. You and the kids will be at my house, and there will be legal protections in place. Sandra's been preparing for this. But the kids, they're still at home with him right now. Where does he think you are? Working until 9. I told him I was covering someone's shift. Good, so we have time. We meet with Sandra, we finalize everything, and then we figure out the safest way to get you and Emma and Lucas out of that house. Karen was crying now, quiet tears that she wiped away with the sleeve of her grocery store vest. I'm so scared, Mom. I know, but you're also so brave. You've been planning this for months. You've been protecting those kids while living in that house, and that takes a kind of strength most people never have to find. We sat there in the parking lot for a few more minutes, my daughter crying and me holding her hand, both of us watching the November wind blow dead leaves across the asphalt. Somewhere inside that grocery store, people were buying food for normal family dinners. Somewhere in the neighborhood, other families were sitting down to watch TV together, have normal arguments about homework and bedtime. But not us. Not anymore. We were past normal. We were in the hard place now. The place where you have to choose between staying quiet to keep peace and speaking up to save yourself. And my daughter had finally chosen to save herself. At Sandra's office, we went over everything one more time. The papers would be filed first thing Wednesday morning. A process server would deliver them to Bradley at his office, neutral territory, where he couldn't make a scene. The documents included a request for an emergency custody order based on his controlling behavior and the children's statements that I'd documented. He's going to fight this, Sandra said, looking at Karen over her reading glasses. Men like your husband don't let go easily. Are you prepared for that? Karen's voice was small, but certain. Yes. And you have a safe place to go immediately after he's served? My mom's house. I've already packed bags for me and the kids. They're hidden in my car trunk. Sandra nodded approvingly. Smart. What about Wednesday? Where will the children be? School, Karen said. I'm going to pick them up early. Tell the office it's a dentist appointment. By the time Bradley gets served at work and makes it to the school, we'll already be gone. It was a good plan, a careful plan. The kind of plan you make when you've been living with someone unpredictable for so long that you've learned to think 3 steps ahead. But even the best plans can't account for everything. As we left Sandra's office and walked to our cars, Karen's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and I watched her face go white. What is it? She held up the phone so I could see the screen. The message was from Bradley. Where are you really? The store says you left at 6:30. We need to talk about your mother when you get home. Karen looked at me with pure fear in her eyes. He knows. He doesn't know everything, but he knows something's wrong. And in that moment, standing in a parking garage in downtown Asheville with my daughter shaking beside me, I realized that our careful timeline had just collapsed. Karen and I sat in my car in that parking garage for almost 10 minutes, both of us staring at Bradley's text message like it might change if we looked at it long enough. He knows something, Karen kept whispering. He knows. My mind was racing, trying to calculate our options. It was 8:15 on a Tuesday night. Emma and Lucas were at home with Bradley. The divorce papers wouldn't be filed until tomorrow morning. We were caught in this terrible in-between place. Not safe in secrecy anymore, but not protected by the legal system yet either. Call him back, I finally said. Karen looked at me like I'd lost my mind. What? Call him. Tell him you went to Target after work to get something for Emma's school project. Tell him you're on your way home now. Act normal. We need to buy time until tomorrow morning when Sandra can file those papers. Mom, I can't go back there tonight. Not if he's suspicious. She was right. I could hear it in the panicked edge of her voice. If Karen walked into that house right now, with Bradley already on alert and questioning her, there was no telling what might happen. Okay, new plan. I was thinking out loud now, trying to piece together something that would keep everyone safe. You call him and tell him you're not feeling well. Tell him you're at my house and you're going to sleep here tonight. You'll pick up the kids and take them to school in the morning like always. He won't like that. He doesn't have to like it. What's he gonna do, come over here and drag you out of my house at 8:30 at night? Even as I said it, though, I wondered if that was exactly what he'd do. I didn't know Bradley's limits anymore. I wasn't sure I'd ever really known them. Karen made the call on speaker so I could hear. Bradley answered on the first ring.
Where the hell have you been?
I'm sorry. Karen's voice shifted into something I'd heard before, but never really recognized until this moment. It became smaller, more apologetic. The voice of someone who'd learned that making herself less threatening was the only way to survive. I wasn't feeling well after work. I'm at my mom's house. You didn't think to call me? I should have. I'm sorry. I just needed to lie down, and I wasn't thinking clearly. There was a long pause. I could hear something in the background, the TV, maybe, or the kids getting ready for bed. What about dinner? Bradley's voice was cold. I had to order pizza for the kids because you weren't here to cook. I'm sorry, Karen said again, and I wanted to reach through the phone and tell her to stop apologizing for being human. Fine. When are you coming home? I thought I'd stay here tonight. I really don't feel well.
And I don't want to drive if the kids need you in the morning.
I'll come by at 7:30 to get them ready and take them to school. I promise. Another long pause. We still need to talk about your mother, about these new boundaries we're setting. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. Okay, Karen said quietly. We can talk tomorrow. After she hung up, she turned to me with tears streaming down her face. Did you hear that? We're setting boundaries. He's already decided. He's going to try to cut you out completely, and I don't even know why. Because he's losing control, I said. Men like Bradley, they need to control everything, and I'm something he can't control. I'm a witness. I see too much. We drove back to my house in silence. When we got inside, Karen finally let herself fall apart. She curled up on my couch and sobbed. All the fear and exhaustion and grief that she'd been holding in for months, maybe years, finally breaking free. I let her cry. Sometimes that's the most loving thing you can do for someone. Just let them feel all of it without trying to fix it or make it better. I brought her tea in a blanket and sat in the chair across from her, being present while she released 12 years of pain. When she finally quieted, she looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. What if I'm making a mistake, Mom? What if I'm ruining the kids' lives? They love their father. Emma still makes him cards. Lucas still waits by the window for him to come home from work. Karen, honey, listen to me. I leaned forward, holding her gaze. Children can love someone and still need to be protected from them. Those two things can both be true at the same time. But what if the court doesn't see it that way? What if they think I'm exaggerating? Bradley's never hit me. He's never hit the kids. It's all just words and control and... She trailed off, like she was trying to convince herself it wasn't that bad. Abuse doesn't have to leave bruises to be real, I said quietly. And Sandra has all the documentation, the financial control, the isolation, the way he uses the children as leverage. That judge is going to see the pattern. You sound so sure. I am sure, because I've been watching this happen for years, and I've been writing it all down. Every concerning thing Emma has said, every time Lucas came to my house and didn't want to go home, every Sunday dinner where I watched Bradley tear you down in front of your own children. I have dates, details, everything. Karen sat up straighter. You documented it? You never told me that. I didn't want to burden you with it. You had enough to carry. But yes, I kept a record, because I'm your mother, and my job is to protect you even when you don't know you need protecting. She started crying again, but different this time. Relief, maybe, or just the overwhelming feeling of realizing you're not as alone as you thought. We stayed up late that night, going over the plan for the next day. Karen would go to the house at 7:30, get the kids ready like it was any other Wednesday, take them to school, but instead of going to work, she would go straight to Sandra's office. The papers would be filed at 9 a.m. Bradley would be served at his office around 10:30. By noon, Karen would pick up the kids from school, early dismissal for a dentist appointment, and bring them to my house. After that, we'd wait to see what Bradley did. That night, I lay in my bed listening to Karen's quiet breathing from the guest room across the hall, and I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Emma and Lucas, asleep in their beds 20 minutes away, with no idea that tomorrow their whole world was going to change. I thought about all the Wednesdays I'd spent with them, all the ice cream trips and garden afternoons and bedtime stories. I thought about the way Emma had started asking those careful questions about whether certain things were normal. The way Lucas had stopped talking as much, like he was learning that words could be dangerous. And I thought about Bradley, probably asleep in the house he thought he controlled completely, with no idea that his wife had been planning her escape for months. That his mother-in-law, the woman he'd dismissed as old-fashioned and irrelevant, had been gathering evidence against him. If you've ever spent a night before a life-changing day, you know that feeling. Time moves differently. Every hour feels like it might be your last chance to turn back, to choose safety over truth. Tell me in the comments if you've ever stood at a crossroads like this. Did you move forward or stay still? What helped you decide? Around 3 a.m., I got up and went to my kitchen. Through the window, I could see the moon making shadows in my garden. The tomato plants were finished for the season, just bare stalks now. But next spring, they'd come back. That's what I was holding on to. The idea that things could die back completely and still return, stronger than before. I made myself tea and sat at the table where, 3 months ago, Karen had first told me the truth. Where she'd cried and whispered, "I can't do this anymore," and started the long journey toward freedom. On my refrigerator, held up with a magnet Emma had made me in kindergarten, was a photo from last Christmas. All of us together, me, Karen, Bradley, Emma, and Lucas. We were smiling. Bradley's arm was around Karen's shoulders. We looked like a normal, happy family. But I knew now what I couldn't see then. The way Karen's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The way Emma was leaning toward me instead of her father. The way Lucas's little hand was gripping his mother's shirt like he was afraid to let go. The clues had been there all along. I'd just been too hopeful, too invested in believing that everything was fine, to read them correctly. Never again, I promised myself. Never again would I choose comfort over truth when it came to protecting my family. At 6 a.m., Karen was up, moving quietly through my house like a ghost. I made her breakfast, but she couldn't eat. "What if something goes wrong today?" she asked, staring at the eggs on her plate. "What if Bradley somehow finds out before the papers are served? What if he gets to the school before I do?" "Then you call 911, I said firmly. "You call Sandra, you call the police, and you do not try to handle it alone. Promise me." She nodded, but I could see the fear still living in her eyes. At 7:15, she left for the house. I wanted to go with her, but we both knew that would raise suspicions. So I stayed behind, pacing my kitchen, checking my phone every 30 seconds, waiting for her to text me that she and the kids were safe at school. The text came at 8:05. "Kids dropped off. They're safe. I'm going to Sandra's office now." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Now we just had to wait for 10:30, when the process server would hand Bradley the divorce papers at his office, and our carefully built secret would explode into the open. I tried to keep busy. I cleaned my already clean house. I baked cookies for when Emma and Lucas arrived later. I watered my plants, folded laundry, did anything to keep my hands occupied and my mind from spinning out into all the terrible possibilities. At 10:45, my phone rang. It was Karen. "It's done," she said, her voice shaking. "Sandra just got confirmation. Bradley was served 15 minutes ago." "How did he react?" "The process server said he went pale, then tried to argue, then started making phone calls. Sandra thinks he'll call his lawyer, maybe try to call the school." "The school won't release the kids to anyone but you without your permission, right?" "Right. I called them this morning and updated the authorization list. Only me and you can pick them up now." "Good. Come back here. We'll get the kids at noon like we planned." But before she could respond, I heard a sound in the background of her call. A car door slamming, then Bradley's voice, loud and angry. "Karen, get out of your car right now!" My blood turned to ice. "Where are you?" "The parking lot at Sandra's office. Mom, he's here. He followed me." And then I heard him yelling, and Karen's voice rising in panic, and Sandra shouting something about calling the police. and the phone went dead. I was in my car before I even fully processed what I'd heard. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition, but somehow I managed. Sandra's office was downtown, 15 minutes away if I drove the speed limit. I made it in 9. The whole drive, I kept redialing Karen's number. It went straight to voicemail every time. I tried to tell myself that meant nothing. Her phone could have died. She could have dropped it. There could be 1,000 innocent explanations. But my mother's intuition was screaming that something was terribly wrong. When I pulled into the parking lot of Sandra's building, I saw them immediately. Bradley's black SUV was parked at an angle across 2 spaces, like he'd been in too much of a hurry to care. Karen's small sedan was 3 spaces away, and standing between the 2 vehicles, in broad daylight in a professional office building parking lot, my son-in-law had my daughter backed against her car door. He wasn't touching her. That's what I noticed first. He was smart enough not to put his hands on her where security cameras could see. But he was standing so close that Karen had nowhere to go, his body blocking her escape, his finger pointing in her face while he yelled. I could hear him before I even got out of my car. "You think you can just divorce me? You think you can take my kids? I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me?" Karen's face was streaked with tears, but she was trying to stand tall, trying to be brave, and it broke my heart, because I could see she was also terrified. I parked my car and got out, my legs feeling steadier than they had any right to. Sometimes, when you're scared for yourself, your body betrays you. But when you're scared for your child, something else kicks in. Something older and fiercer than fear. "Bradley!" I called out, my voice cutting across the parking lot. "Step away from her!" He whipped around, and the look on his face when he saw me was pure rage. "This is none of your business, Claire. This is between me and my wife." "Your wife called me. That makes it my business. Now step back." For a moment, I thought he might actually come at me. I could see him calculating it, weighing whether he could intimidate an older woman the same way he'd been intimidating my daughter for years. But we were in public, and there were people starting to notice the commotion. Someone in the building was probably already calling security. Bradley seemed to realize this at the same time I did. He took one step back from Karen, but his eyes never left her face. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and cold. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life. Those are my children, and I will not let you poison them against me." "Nobody's poisoning anyone," I said, moving to stand next to Karen. "The papers were filed legally. If you have concerns, you can address them through your lawyer." "My lawyer?" He laughed, but there was nothing funny in the sound. "My lawyer is going to destroy you both. You think you can prove I'm a bad father? I've never laid a hand on those kids. I provided for them, given them a good home, paid for everything they've ever needed." "And screamed at their mother in front of them," I said quietly. "And taught them that love looks like control, and made them afraid to talk to their own grandmother because they might say the wrong thing." His face went white, then red. "Lucas told you that? That little—" "Don't!" Karen's voice was stronger than I'd heard it in years. "Don't you dare finish that sentence about our son." Bradley turned back to her, and for a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Not quite recognition, but surprise. Like he was seeing someone he didn't quite recognize. Someone who wasn't backing down anymore. "Karen," he said, and his voice shifted, became softer, more pleading. This was the other side of him, the one he showed when anger didn't work. "Baby, come on. We can work this out. We don't need lawyers and courts. We can go to counseling. I'll change. I promise I'll change." I'd heard about this part. Sandra had warned us. The anger, then the promises, then the anger again if the promises didn't work. It was a cycle, predictable as seasons. "No," Karen said simply. "I'm done." "You're done? You're done?" The softness evaporated instantly. "You don't get to be done. You made vows, for better or worse. You don't just walk away from a marriage because things get hard." "I'm not walking away because things got hard," Karen said, and I heard steel in her voice now. I'm walking away because you made things impossible. There's a difference. Before Bradley could respond, Sandra appeared from the building entrance with a security guard. Mr. Thornton, you need to leave this property immediately, or we'll call the police. This is my wife. This is private property and you're creating a disturbance. The divorce papers you were served this morning include a provision about harassment. If you don't leave now, Mrs. Thornton will have grounds to file for a restraining order. I watched the calculation happen on Bradley's face. He was a man who cared very much about appearances, about being seen as respectable and successful. A restraining order, police involvement, those things would be public record. His coworkers might find out. His friends at the golf club might hear about it. Fine, he spat, but this conversation isn't over, Karen. We have children together. You can't just erase me from their lives. Nobody's trying to erase you, Sandra said calmly. The custody arrangement proposed in the divorce filing is standard joint custody, with some supervised visits initially. If you want to contest that, you can do so through proper legal channels. Bradley looked at all of us, Sandra, the security guard, me, and finally Karen.
You're going to regret this,
he said to my daughter.
all of you.
Then he walked to his SUV and drove away, too fast, tires squealing slightly as he left the parking lot. The second his car was out of sight, Karen's legs gave out. I caught her before she hit the ground, holding her up while she sobbed into my shoulder. I've got you, I whispered. I've got you, baby. You're safe. You did so good. Sandra waited a respectful moment, then said quietly, we need to file for an emergency protective order. That behavior, the intimidation, the implicit threats, it's exactly what we were worried about. Will it help with custody? I asked, still holding Karen. Absolutely. A judge needs to see that he can't control his behavior even in public, even when he knows he's being watched. This actually strengthens Karen's case significantly. We went up to Sandra's office, and while she started the paperwork for the protective order, I sat with Karen on the small couch in the waiting area. What about the kids? Karen asked suddenly, her voice panicked. What if he goes to the school? I checked my watch. It was 11:15. We're picking them up in 45 minutes. The school won't release them to him without your permission, and you already updated the authorization list this morning. He can't get to them. But what if he tries?
What if he makes a scene at the school?
Sandra overheard and came to the doorway. If he shows up at the school, they'll call the police. But honestly, I don't think he will. Men like Bradley are very concerned with public image. He won't want a scene in front of teachers and other parents. She was right. When we arrived at the elementary school at noon, there was no sign of Bradley's SUV. I'd driven separately so Karen could take the kids in her car, and I'd followed her just in case. The school secretary was expecting us. Karen had called ahead and explained, vaguely, that there was a family situation and she needed to pick the kids up early. The secretary had been kind and discreet, asking no questions. Emma and Lucas came down from their classrooms looking confused but not upset. Emma was carrying her backpack and Lucas had his lunchbox, and they both brightened when they saw their mother and me waiting. Grandma! Lucas ran to me and wrapped his arms around my legs. Are you taking us for ice cream? I looked at Karen and she nodded slightly. There would be time later to explain. For now, we just needed to get them somewhere safe. Maybe tomorrow, buddy, I said, ruffling his hair. Today we're going to have a special afternoon at my house. In the car on the way back, Karen driving with both kids, me following behind, I watched Emma in the back seat through the rear window. She was looking out at the passing scenery, her face thoughtful and serious. She knew something was different. She was 10 years old and she'd been reading the tension in her house for long enough that she could feel when things shifted. If you've ever had to protect children during a crisis, you know this terrible balance. Tell them too much and you steal their childhood. Tell them too little and they fill in the blanks with fears that are worse than the truth. Where's that line? I still don't know. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had to navigate this. How did you decide what to say? When we got to my house, I'd already prepared the guest bedroom for Karen and set up sleeping bags in the living room for the kids, like it was a fun campout, not an emergency refuge. I had snacks and juice boxes and the cookies I'd baked that morning. For the first hour, we just let them be kids. They played in the backyard, they had cookies, they watched cartoons. Karen sat at my kitchen table looking shell-shocked, like she couldn't quite believe she'd actually done it. She'd actually left. Around 3 p.m., Karen's phone started ringing. Bradley's name on the screen. She looked at me, panicked. "Don't answer," I said. "Sandra told you not to engage directly. Let it go to voicemail." It rang 6 times over the next hour. Then the text messages started. "We need to talk about the kids. This is ridiculous. Call me back. You can't just take my children without discussing it with me. I'm their father. I have rights. Your mother is turning you against me." Each message was a little angrier than the last. Karen showed them to me with shaking hands. "He's spiraling," I said. "And that's good for your case, but we need to document everything. Screenshot all of these and send them to Sandra." At 5 p.m., Sandra called with news. The emergency protective order had been granted.
Bradley couldn't come within 500 feet of Karen, me, or my house.
If he violated it, he'd be arrested.
"What about the kids?" Karen asked.
The order allows for supervised visitation, which can happen at a neutral location with a court-appointed supervisor. He'll be notified of the order tonight. After that, any contact he makes with you is a violation. That night, I made spaghetti and meatballs, the kids' favorite, and we had dinner at my table, like we'd done 100 times before, except this time, there was an empty chair where Bradley usually sat, and this time, the kids kept looking at it, questions forming in their eyes. Finally, over dessert, Emma asked what we'd been waiting for her to ask. "Where's Daddy? Why are we sleeping at Grandma's house on a Wednesday?" Karen took a deep breath. I watched her reach for the strength she'd been building for 3 months, gathering it around her like armor. "Daddy and I need some time apart," she said gently. "We're not getting along very well right now, and we think it's better if we live in different places for a while." "Are you getting divorced?" Emma's voice was small. Karen's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away from her daughter. "Yes, sweetheart, we are." Lucas looked confused. "But where will we live?" "Here with Grandma for now. Then we'll find our own apartment, just the 3 of us, somewhere new." "Will we still see Daddy?" Emma asked. "Of course. Daddy loves you very much, and you'll spend time with him too. It just won't be all of us together in the same house anymore." I watched Emma process this. She was quiet for a long moment, and then she said something that made both Karen and me freeze. "Is it because Daddy yells so much?" Karen's hand went to her mouth. "Emma." "It's okay, Mom. I know. Lucas knows too. We just didn't know if you knew." And right there, sitting at my kitchen table over half-eaten ice cream sundaes, my 10-year-old granddaughter revealed that she and her 7-year-old brother had been carrying this weight in silence, knowing their father's behavior was wrong, wondering if their mother could see it, afraid to say anything because they didn't want to make things worse. Karen started crying, pulling Emma into a hug. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry you had to worry about that. This is not your fault. None of this is your fault." "I know," Emma said, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. "Mrs. Henderson at school told us that when parents split up, it's never the kid's fault." Mrs. Henderson, I learned later, was the school counselor. Emma had been talking to her for months, working through her anxiety about her home life. Another thing we hadn't known, another sign we'd missed. That night, after the kids were finally asleep in their sleeping bags, Karen and I sat in my living room in the dark. "They knew," she whispered. "All this time, I thought I was hiding it from them, protecting them, but they knew." "They knew because they're smart," I said gently, "and because you raised them to be observant and emotionally intelligent. That's not a failure, Karen. That's you being a good mother." A good mother wouldn't have stayed so long. A good mother does what she needs to do to survive until she can find a way out, and that's exactly what you did. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the sound of the kids breathing in the next room. Safe, together, free. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, lawyers and court dates, and the hard work of rebuilding a life from scratch. But tonight, in this moment, we had won something important. We had chosen truth over comfort, Safety over appearances. We had chosen to protect the children even though it meant blowing up everything we'd built. And sometimes, that's what love looks like. Not the pretty version in greeting cards, but the real kind. The kind that says, this far and no further, and means it. The first week at my house had a strange rhythm to it. Days were almost normal. Karen took the kids to school and went to her shifts at the grocery store while I kept the house running. I made lunches,
Did laundry, kept everything as routine as possible for Emma and Lucas. But nights were harder.
That's when Bradley would start calling and texting. When Karen would lie awake in the guest room, listening for sounds that didn't come. When the kids would wake up from nightmares asking for their dad. The protective order was in place, but that didn't stop Bradley from pushing every boundary he could without technically breaking the law. He'd drive slowly past my house, never stopping, never parking, just cruising by at exactly 500 feet, which was the legal limit. He knew we'd see his car, that was the point. He sent emails instead of texts, long, rambling messages about his rights as a father and how Karen was damaging the children by keeping them from him. He never mentioned me directly, but the subtext was clear. I was the villain in his story, the interfering mother-in-law who'd poisoned his wife against him. Sandra said this was all normal. Men who are losing control will test every boundary, she explained during one of our phone calls. He's looking for a reaction, for proof that you're being unreasonable. The best thing you can do is document everything and don't engage. So that's what we did. Karen screenshotted every email, noted every time his car drove past. We were building a paper trail that would matter when the custody hearing came. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Until then, Bradley had supervised visitation rights, 2 hours every Saturday at a family services center with a trained monitor present. The first visit was that coming weekend. Karen was terrified.
What if he convinces them I'm crazy? She asked me on Friday night after the kids were in bed.
What if Emma and Lucas tell the monitor they miss their dad and want to go home with him? Then the monitor will note that the children love their father, which is natural and healthy, I said. But they'll also note anything inappropriate that he says or does. These people are trained to spot manipulation. What if he's on his best behavior? What if he acts like the perfect dad and makes me look like I'm overreacting? I took her hands in mine. Karen, you have 3 months of documentation. You have bank records showing financial abuse. You have my notes about the children's anxiety. You have your own testimony about years of emotional manipulation. One charming afternoon isn't going to erase all of that. But I understood her fear. When you've been controlled by someone for so long, it's hard to believe that other people will see through the performance. You start to doubt your own reality. That Saturday morning, I drove Karen and the kids to the Family Services Center. It was in a nondescript office building, designed to be neutral territory, not home to either parent, somewhere new for everyone. Emma was quiet on the drive. Lucas kept asking questions. Will Daddy be happy to see us? Can we tell him about my science project? Will he come home with us after? Each question was a small knife in Karen's heart. I could see it on her face. At the center, a woman named Patricia met us in the waiting room. She was maybe 50, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that immediately put the kids at ease. She explained that she would be in the room with them and their father the whole time, and that if anyone felt uncomfortable, they could tell her. What if I want to come out early? Emma asked, and I saw Patricia's eyes flicker with understanding. This child had already learned to plan her exits. Then you tell me, and we'll take a break, Patricia said. You're in charge of how you feel, okay? Bradley arrived 5 minutes late, which I suspected was strategic. Make everyone wait, keep the power dynamic tilted in his favor. But when he walked into the waiting room and saw the kids, his whole face changed. The anger that had been living there since the divorce papers were served melted away, and for a moment, he looked like the man Karen had fallen in love with 15 years ago. Emma! Lucas! He dropped to his knees and opened his arms, and both kids ran to him. I watched Karen's face as she watched her children hug their father. The pain there was almost unbearable. Because this was the impossible truth of leaving. The kids loved him. Despite everything, they loved him. And seeing them in his arms, seeing how much they'd missed him, made her question everything. "It's okay," I whispered to her. "This doesn't mean you made the wrong choice." Patricia gestured for Bradley and the kids to follow her to the visitation room. As they walked away, Bradley looked back at Karen with an expression I couldn't quite read. Triumph? Sadness? A warning? Karen and I sat in the waiting room for 2 hours. There were magazines, terrible coffee, other families in similar situations. A young mother nursing a baby while she waited. A father who looked barely out of his teens, bouncing his leg anxiously. We were all here for the same reason. Families broken open, trying to figure out how to protect the children while the adults worked out their damage. When Patricia finally brought Emma and Lucas back out, both kids looked confused and emotionally exhausted. "How was it?" Karen asked, trying to keep her voice light. "Fine," Emma said quietly. Lucas said nothing, just climbed into his mother's lap and buried his face in her neck. Patricia asked if she could speak with Karen privately for a moment. I took the kids to look at the fish tank in the corner, while Patricia and Karen talked in low voices near the door. When Karen came back, her face was pale. "What happened?" I asked once we were in the car. Patricia said Bradley spent most of the visit asking the kids questions about where we're staying, about our daily routine, about whether I talk about him. She said he was subtle about it, but it was clearly gathering information rather than just spending time with them. Did she put that in her report? Yes. She also noted that Lucas started crying when Bradley asked him why he thought Mommy and Daddy couldn't live together anymore. She said Bradley told Lucas that sometimes mommies make mistakes and daddies have to forgive them. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. He's already trying to rewrite the narrative. Patricia said she redirected him, told him that type of conversation wasn't appropriate during supervised visitation. But Emma heard it, Lucas heard it, and now they're confused about whose fault this is. That night, Emma crawled into bed with me. She was too old for it, really, but I made room anyway, and she curled up against my side like she used to do when she was small. "Grandma," she whispered in the dark, "is it Mommy's fault that Daddy doesn't live with us anymore?" "No, sweetheart. Your mom made a very brave choice to keep everyone safe and healthy." "But Daddy said Mommy made a mistake." Sometimes adults disagree about what mistakes are. But I want you to remember something, okay? Your mom loves you more than anything in the world, and everything she's doing is to make sure you and Lucas grow up feeling safe and happy. Emma was quiet for a long time, then, "I do feel safer now. Is that bad? Is it bad that I don't miss the yelling?" My heart broke and mended at the same time. "No, baby, that's not bad at all. That's your heart telling you the truth." The next 2 weeks followed a similar pattern: school, work, supervised visits on Saturday, Bradley pushing boundaries in ways that were technically legal, but clearly meant to intimidate. One night, he sent Karen an email at 11:45 p.m. with the subject line, "What you're doing to our children." Another time, he showed up at the grocery store where she worked, not approaching her directly, but making sure she saw him in a parking lot when her shift ended. Each incident got documented and sent to Sandra. The evidence folder was growing thicker by the day. If you've ever been through something like this, the legal limbo, the emotional exhaustion, the constant documentation of someone else's harassment, you know how it wears you down. Tell me in the comments, how did you keep going? What kept you strong when you wanted to give up? For me, it was watching my granddaughter sleep peacefully for the first time in months. It was seeing Karen slowly start to relax, start to laugh again. It was Lucas making jokes at dinner and Emma signing up for soccer at her new school. These small moments of healing, they were everything. 3 days before the custody hearing, Bradley's lawyer sent over his counter-proposal. Instead of the joint custody with supervised visitation that Karen had requested, Bradley was asking for full custody with Karen getting supervised visits. His argument was that Karen had kidnapped the children and was alienating them from their father. That I was an inappropriate influence, that Karen's mental health was unstable, evidenced by her sudden and irrational decision to leave the marriage with no warning.
Reading those words made me physically ill.
But Sandra was calm. "This is a common tactic," she said. "Accuse the other party of exactly what you're doing. It creates confusion and puts Karen on the defensive. But we have evidence. We have Patricia's reports from the supervised visits showing his manipulative behavior. We have your documentation of the children's anxiety. We have financial records. The judge will see through this." "What if they don't?" Karen asked, her voice small. "Then we appeal. But I've been doing this for 20 years, and I promise you, judges see cases like this all the time. They know the patterns." The night before the hearing, Karen couldn't sleep. I found her at 2 a.m. sitting at my kitchen table, looking at old photos on her phone. "What are you doing?" I asked gently. "Trying to remember when it started. When he went from the man I fell in love with to this." I sat down next to her. "Does it matter?" "I don't know. Maybe. I keep thinking if I could identify the moment, I could understand how I didn't see it sooner." "Karen, honey, you're asking yourself to have known things you couldn't have known. That's not fair to the woman you were." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "What if I lose them tomorrow? What if the judge believes him?" "You won't lose them. Even in the absolute worst-case scenario, which is not going to happen, you would still have visitation. You would still be their mother, but that's not going to happen because you have the truth on your side." The truth doesn't always win. She was right about that. The truth doesn't always win, but sometimes it does. And sometimes all you can do is show up, tell your story, and trust that someone will hear it. The next morning, we all got dressed in our best clothes. Sandra had coached us on courtroom behavior. Sit up straight, answer questions clearly. Don't show anger no matter what Bradley says. Emma and Lucas stayed home with a neighbor. Karen didn't want them to hear any of this. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, less dramatic. Just a room with some chairs and a bench where the judge would sit. Bradley was already there with his lawyer, a expensive-looking man in a navy suit. When Bradley saw us walk in, his expression flickered between anger and something that might have been pain. For just a second, I wondered if part of him actually didn't understand why this was happening. If he'd convinced himself that his behavior had been normal, acceptable, loving even. Then the moment passed and his face hardened again. The judge was a woman in her 50s named Judge Patricia Morrison. She looked tired, like she'd seen too many families tear themselves apart in this room, but her eyes were sharp and kind at the same time. Bradley's lawyer went first, painting a picture of a devoted father, blindsided by his unstable wife, manipulated by an overbearing mother-in-law. They presented Bradley as the victim, claimed Karen had shown no signs of unhappiness before suddenly fleeing with the children. Then it was Sandra's turn. She presented everything, the financial records showing how Bradley had controlled every dollar, the text messages showing his angry, threatening language, Patricia's reports from supervised visitation, my documented observations of the children's anxiety, and finally, Karen's own testimony. I watched my daughter sit in that witness chair and tell her story. The years of walking on eggshells, the constant criticism, the isolation from friends and family, the fear. She spoke clearly and calmly, and when Bradley's lawyer tried to shake her testimony with aggressive questions, she didn't break. "Isn't it true," his lawyer asked, "that your husband never hit you?" "Physical violence isn't the only kind of abuse," Karen answered. "But you can't point to a single bruise, a single injury." "I can point to years of bruises on my spirit, on my sense of self, on my children's sense of safety in their own home." Judge Morrison watched all of this with an unreadable expression. When both sides had finished presenting their cases, she looked at Bradley directly. "Mr. Thornton, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer honestly. Do you believe you have controlling tendencies?" Bradley shifted in his chair. I believe I have strong opinions about how a family should be run. But that's not controlling. That's being a father, a husband." "Do you believe," the judge interrupted, "that your wife had the right to seek a divorce without your permission?" "Of course, but—" "Yes or no, Mr. Thornton?" A long pause. "Yes." "Then why have you spent the last 3 weeks harassing her? Driving past her residence, showing up at her workplace, sending late-night emails?" I was trying to talk to her. She's my wife. She's your estranged wife who has obtained a protective order against you. The fact that you see these actions as trying to talk rather than harassment tells me everything I need to know. And in that moment,
Watching Bradley realize he wasn't going to charm or manipulate his way through this, I felt something release in my chest. Someone in authority was seeing him clearly. Someone was hearing us. Judge Morrison took a brief recess to review all the evidence, and when she came back, her ruling was clear. Custody would remain with Karen. Bradley would continue supervised visitation for the next 6 months, with the possibility of moving to unsupervised visits if he completed a program for managing anger and controlling behaviors. The protective order would remain in place, and he was to have no contact with me or my residents. Bradley's face went white, then red. His lawyer put a hand on his arm, probably warning him not to react. But I could see the rage simmering there, barely contained. As we left the courtroom, Sandra pulled us aside. This is a good outcome, but be prepared for him to escalate before he calms down. Men like Bradley don't handle losing control well. She was right to warn us. That night at 11:30 p.m., my doorbell rang. Then someone pounded on the door. Then Bradley's voice shouting from the sidewalk, exactly 500 feet away. I realized later he'd measured it.
Karen, I know you're in there. You can't keep my kids from me. Karen!
I called 911 while Karen held the children, who'd woken up scared. The police arrived within minutes. They couldn't arrest Bradley. Technically, he hadn't violated the protective order, but they documented the incident and warned him that his behavior was escalating into harassment. After he left and the kids were finally back to sleep, Karen looked at me with exhausted eyes. "When does it end, Mom? When does he finally accept this and leave us alone?" "I don't know, honey, but we just keep doing what we're doing. We keep documenting, keep following the court orders, keep protecting these babies. And eventually, he'll either get tired or the consequences will catch up with him." What I didn't say, what I was still learning myself, was that healing isn't a destination you arrive at. It's something you choose every single day, even when you're tired, even when the person who hurt you won't let you forget. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just keep choosing it. Keep choosing safety over familiarity. Keep choosing truth over peace. Keep choosing yourself and your children, even when the whole world seems designed to make you doubt that choice. That night, I added another entry to my notebook. Not about Bradley this time, but about Karen. About the way she'd sat in that witness chair and told her truth without apologizing for it. About the way she'd comforted her children, even though she was scared too. About the way she was becoming someone I'd always known she could be. A woman who knew her own worth and refused to settle for less. 6 months after the custody hearing, my kitchen looks different. There are Emma's soccer cleats by the back door, still muddy from last night's practice. Lucas's spelling test on the refrigerator with a big red 100% at the top. Karen's nursing textbooks stacked on the counter. She went back to school this fall, finishing the degree she put aside when she got married. It's late October now, and through my window, I can see the garden where Emma helped me plant mums last weekend. The tomatoes are gone for the season, but there's still life here, still growth. Karen and the kids moved into their own apartment 2 months ago. It's small, just 2 bedrooms, and Lucas sleeps on a trundle bed in Emma's room, but it's theirs. Karen picked out the paint colors. The kids chose their own bedspreads. Nobody criticizes how she arranges the furniture or questions why she bought the brand of cereal she bought. Last week, Emma told me it feels like they can finally breathe. They still come to my house 3 or 4 times a week. Wednesday ice cream is sacred again. Sunday dinners happen around my table, and now there's laughter instead of tension, inside jokes instead of walking on eggshells. Bradley still sees the kids every Saturday, but it's different now. After 3 months of supervised visits, the monitor reported that he'd started actually spending time with Emma and Lucas instead of interrogating them. He took a court-mandated parenting class, and while I don't know if it truly changed his heart, it at least changed his behavior enough that the judge approved unsupervised visitation. He's dating someone new, Lucas mentioned casually last week. A woman from his office. Part of me wants to warn her, to tell her what kind of man he becomes when the charm wears off. But that's not my story to tell.
All I can do is hope she sees the signs sooner than my daughter did. The last time Bradley drove past my house was 4 months ago. After that incident the night of the custody hearing, he tried a few more times to push boundaries, showing up at Emma's soccer games uninvited, sending Karen emails that technically didn't violate the protective order, but clearly were meant to unsettle her. Each time, we documented it. Each time, Sandra sent a firm letter from her office. Eventually, he seemed to understand that we weren't going to react the way he wanted. We weren't going to engage with his attempts at control. And without that reaction, without that power, he lost interest in the game. That's what I've learned about people like Bradley. They need the drama. They need the reaction. And when you stop giving it to them, when you just keep quietly building your life without them, they eventually move on to someone else who will play along. Is that fair to the next person? No, but I can't save everyone. I can only save the people in my own kitchen. Karen is different now too. Not completely healed. I don't think anyone completely heals from 12 years of being told they're not enough. But stronger. She speaks up more. She makes decisions without second-guessing herself into paralysis. She laughs more easily. Last month, on what would have been her 15th wedding anniversary, I found her crying in my bathroom. Not because she missed Bradley, but because she was grieving the years she'd lost, the version of herself she'd had to bury to survive in that marriage. I don't even know who I would have been, she told me, if I'd left sooner, or if I'd never married him at all. You'd have been someone different, I said, but not necessarily better. You're exactly who you're supposed to be right now. And your kids got to see their mother find her courage. That's worth something. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I just wish I'd seen it sooner. I wish I'd protected them from more of it. This is the work of healing, not just the leaving, but the forgiving yourself for staying as long as you did. Karen is still learning that. We both are. The visual anchor object, that phone where I first heard Bradley try to take my grandchildren away, sits in my kitchen drawer now. I keep it there even though I got a new phone months ago. Sometimes I take it out and remember that conversation, how scared I was, how powerless I felt in that first moment. And then I remember what came after, how that powerlessness transformed into action, how my silence on that call became strategic instead of defeated. I keep the phone to remind myself that the scariest moment isn't the end of the story. Sometimes it's just the beginning of finding out how strong you really are. If you're listening to this, and you recognize yourself in any part of this story, I want you to know something. That feeling in your gut, the one that tells you something is wrong, even when everyone else says it's fine. That feeling is not crazy. You're not imagining it. You're not being too sensitive or too dramatic or too anything. Your intuition is trying to protect you, and you should listen to it. I ignored mine for too long. I saw the signs in my daughter's marriage and told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. I watched my grandchildren become anxious and convinced myself all kids go through phases. I accepted Bradley's dismissiveness as just his personality, not a pattern of disrespect. But the truth was there all along, waiting for me to be brave enough to see it. The moral of this story, if there is one, isn't that all marriages are bad or that you should leave at the first sign of trouble. It's that you deserve to feel safe in your own life. Your children deserve to grow up without fear. And protecting that safety is never the wrong choice, even when it's the hardest one. Even when people call you dramatic. Even when your son-in-law laughs at you on the phone. Even when you're 62 years old and wondering if you're too old, too traditional, too something to really make a difference. You're not. Emma is thriving now. She made the select soccer team and started a coding club at school. Last week she told Karen she wants to be a lawyer when she grows up. So I can help other kids whose parents are fighting. She's 10 years old and already turning her pain into purpose. Lucas is gentler, more hesitant to trust. But he started drawing again, these elaborate pictures of dragons and castles that his teacher says show real talent. He draws me into them sometimes, a grandmother figure standing guard at the castle gates. "That's you, Grandma," he told me last week, pointing to the fierce-looking woman with a sword. "You protect everyone." I'm not sure I deserve that image. There were so many times I felt anything but fierce. So many nights I lay awake wondering if we'd made the right choice, if the kids would be damaged by the divorce, if I should have just kept quiet and let Karen handle it alone. But maybe that's what real strength looks like. Not the absence of fear, but choosing to act despite it. Not knowing all the answers, but trusting that protecting the people you love is worth the uncertainty. Now I want to ask you something, and I really hope you'll share in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Are you having morning coffee in California? Watching this late at night in New York? Somewhere across the ocean where my story crossed paths with yours. It means more than you know to feel your company, to know that women all over the world are listening and supporting each other through these impossible situations. If this story touched your heart in any way, please give it a like so I know I'm not alone in this. Subscribe to Jessica's Stories Vault so you don't miss the other stories I pour my heart into. And if you're able, the Super Thanks feature or channel membership helps me keep telling these stories for women who need to hear them. But most importantly, if you've ever had to make a hard choice to protect yourself or someone you love, I want to hear about it. Share what you're comfortable sharing in the comments. Your story might be exactly what another woman needs to hear today to find her own courage. What part of this story felt closest to your own life? Was it the moment of realizing something was wrong? The fear of speaking up? The relief of finally being believed? The slow work of healing afterward? There's no right answer. There's just your truth, and it matters. These days, my life is quieter than it's been in years. Wednesday afternoons with the grandkids. Sunday dinners that end in laughter instead of tension. My garden in the backyard, where I'm already planning what to plant next spring. Karen asked me last week if I ever regret getting involved, if I wish I'd just let her handle it on her own. Not for a second, I told her. You're my daughter. Those are my grandchildren. There was never a version of this story where I stood by and did nothing. She hugged me then, holding on longer than usual. I couldn't have done this without you, she whispered. Yes, you could have, I said, but I'm grateful you didn't have to. That's the thing about family, the real kind, the kind that shows up when it matters. You don't leave people to fight their battles alone just because it's uncomfortable or complicated. You don't look away from suffering just because it's easier. You show up. You stand witness. You hold the flashlight while they find their way out of the dark. And sometimes, that's enough. Sometimes, that's everything. So to anyone listening who's in the dark right now, wondering if you'll ever find your way out, you will. Maybe not today, maybe not next month, but if you keep choosing yourself, keep choosing safety, keep choosing truth, you'll get there. And when you do, there will be people like me waiting on the other side. Grandmothers and mothers and sisters and friends who've walked this road before, who will welcome you into the light and help you remember who you were before someone tried to convince you that you were less. You are not less. You never were. You are enough, exactly as you are. And your story, the one you're living right now, the one that feels too messy and painful to ever make sense, that story matters. Tell it, live it, survive it. And on the other side, when you're sitting in your own kitchen drinking coffee and watching your own garden grow, remember this moment. Remember how strong you had to be to get there. Then reach back and help the next woman find her way through. That's how we heal. Not alone, but together. Thank you for walking this road with me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. You're not alone. You never were, and neither am I.